Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, June 1st, 2024, and today we're going to be making a 2024 presidential election prediction. Over 5 months out from the November 5th presidential election, an election that will determine a lot for the future of this nation, two political candidates here, President Joe Biden, the incumbent president, and former President Donald Trump. In the third ever bid for President Trump for the White House here, a very interesting election season and a very interesting past couple of weeks following a criminal investigation into President Trump, which recently we found that the jury of his peers found him guilty on 34 counts, making President Trump a convicted felon, alongside a number of different things happening in terms of international conflict, domestic relations between Democrats and Republicans, and generally speaking, a very intense lead up into the summer and general election campaign season. Now, our 2024 electoral map, entirely blank, is on your screen right now. 538 toss-up electoral votes right now, 270 are needed to win. For a bit of a flashback, back in 2020, President Biden won his election against Donald Trump, 306 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 232. In 2016, the numbers were the exact same, except reversed. Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton 306 to 232. And so this time around, the electoral map is not likely to be the exact same as it was in 2020 or 2016. States are going to vote different ways. States are going to flip red and blue, and it's on us to really understand, at least as of right now, this election prediction is a snapshot in time if the election was held today, where the map might be going and which candidates tend to perform the best. And so right now, we're going to start off this election prediction by getting some very easy states out of the way. States that we like to call safe Republican or safe Democrat, meaning that there is no realistic possibility, regardless of circumstance, that the opposition party ends up winning these states, or that the party that is characterized to win these states ends up losing this state in the eventual election. And so this means states like Idaho and Montana, which are going to be very strong for President Trump. He's going to easily steamroll in a lot of these states here, not necessarily battleground states and not necessarily ones that determine the future of anything beyond, what we already know about them. These states here are pretty much the ones that Republicans and Democrats can rely on pretty much without fail, and it's been pretty consistent over the past, 2-3 decades now. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has a number of his states that can be characterized as safe Democrat. They were back in 2020, they were in 2016, they will be again in 2024, and so those are the states that we are characterizing right now as safe Democratic states. And so that includes states like New York and California, very large, very populous states here, which brings Joe Biden and his total number up to 181 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 125. Now, you might be wondering, okay, we are roughly 232 toss-up electoral votes here. There are plenty of pathways for either side of the aisle to reach 270 electoral votes. And in a normal election, you would be absolutely correct. But the interesting thing about this race is that because these states, have spoken on a Donald Trump-Joe Biden election in the past, many of them are not likely to change their answer to the voting box, that they gave back in 2020. Meaning states like Texas, which voted for Donald Trump by 6 points, probably will re-elect President Trump in the election. Same thing with, or choose to re-elect him in 2024. Same thing with states like Minnesota and Virginia, which went to Biden by 7 points plus, probably will be going for Biden again. And so in a way, surprisingly enough, this presidential election is probably one of the more boring ones when it comes down to overall election predictions. A lot of these states, we could have transplanted the 2020 election results, even in some cases county by county, and, projected them for 2024 with subtle adjustments, and it would be largely correct. And that's because, again, in a rematch election, you often find that even in 4 years, voters tend to not change their minds too much. I will say, President Trump is right now performing the best in terms of national polls than he has ever done in a presidential election, but I will also caution that in saying the recent court case decision, which found him to be now a convicted felon, on top of the fact that President Trump comes into this race as someone who does have a lot of electoral baggage that maybe some voters right now don't necessarily see as, part of their calculus in the election, but there absolutely are reasons why Donald Trump isn't also, blowing this out of the water given where President Biden's approval rating is. Now, this video isn't largely about the polls or approval ratings, but of course that informs part of how we do things here. But I want to shift back to our electoral map here. Donald Trump at 125, Joe Biden at 181. What's next for the electoral map? And so what's next that comes in are the states that we like to call likely Democratic states. States like New Mexico, which we know, in some circumstance could go to the Republican Party, but the margin we're expecting here is anywhere between 5 to 15 percentage points in favor of the Democratic Party. Not locked down enough that we can say unequivocally there is no chance that Republicans win here, but genuinely speaking, we could lock in on it pretty solidly, but the margin here is what we're worried about. And I also like to use margin just as an overall indicator because I think it's more accurate in terms of what you actually expect to happen on the election. A candidate might technically have a 55% chance of victory in a state like New Mexico. This is not the case for Joe Biden, but in that circumstance and yet still win by 8 to 9 points because of a last-minute scandal, there are reasons to believe that percentage should be merited, more than overall margin. But I personally believe very heavily in predicting margins, and so New Mexico kicks off this state as a state that would go to Joe Biden by anywhere between 5 to 15%. Same thing would go for the likely red states. Just in that circumstance, they would go to Donald Trump in that matchup. And so that includes states right now, states like Maine, which has a first district here, which will be pretty solid for the Democratic Party. The second district, not so much. Averages the state out to about a likely margin. Minnesota will be likely blue. Colorado will be likely blue. Virginia will also be likely blue. And that brings, the map here to 221. The last two characterizations that are likely blue I would make are New Hampshire and Nebraska's second district. For a bit more context here, Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, very strong states for Biden back in 2020, arguably even two. New Hampshire. Biden did well in Minnesota. He did well in New Hampshire. He won Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico by more than 10 points. I think that's enough to say, genuinely speaking, Biden at least wins these states by 5 points in 2024. Nebraska second also went to Joe Biden by roughly 7 points. It's very interesting, though. Nebraska breaks away from the rest of the congressional delegation here. Nebraska and Maine are two states here that allow themselves to allocate electoral votes based on congressional district voting. The Constitution does not declare that you must do a winner-take-all system, and so Nebraska and Maine right now are two states that allow their own congressional districts to vote for whichever party, even if it disagrees with the overall state itself. That brings Joe Biden to 226 electoral votes. Donald Trump, on the other hand, of course, has his own fair share of likely states, and arguably some very large ones. We'll start off with the smallest, which is Maine's second district here, where Donald Trump traditionally does very, very well across the battleground state, or district here. Maine's second goes to Donald Trump. He was the first Republican to win it in a very long time, but you could start to see the bleeding from Obama 2008 to 2012, and then 2016 came around. Donald Trump swooped in at the right time, right momentum, and he won in Maine's second district. But where you really start to see him shine through in the battleground states are states like Ohio and Iowa, where he flipped these states from Obama states in 12, kept them in 2020, and will keep them again in 2024. These two states here have shifted too far to the right for Democrats to have any hope here on the presidential level. Ohio in 2012 went to Obama by 3, went to Trump by 8 in the next election, despite all the investment in the state, and around the state, Ohio stayed the same exact Republican margin in 2020 as they had in 2016. Iowa shifted by roughly a point. Again, these two states, despite heavy investments, not enough to bring Biden over the finish line. Iowa and Ohio became red states, and they will be red again in 2024. Moving down to the state of Florida, a pretty big one here. Donald Trump wins the 30 electoral votes out of the state. Very strong performance, very good margin here. We started to see where Democrats really did not do well in 2020, then came 2022. It was, a shellacking for Democrats there. They went from being in a competitive range in 2018, losing the governorship by less than a point, losing the Senate election by less than a point. Then came 4 years later, 2022. Republicans win the governorship by 20. They win the Senate election by 19. And so you see that in just a 4-year period of time, Florida went from being a state that was not opposed to electing Democrats, but Republicans have gotten the upper hand, to then in 2022, where it's now, as conservative on that margin in 2022, even more so than some of its surrounding states, like South Carolina and Mississippi. I mean, it is a very, very phenomenal performance there for Republicans in Florida, and it will be again in 2024. Donald Trump will expand from his 3-point margin in 2020 to somewhere around 7 to 9 points in 2024. Moving over to the next state I would characterize as a likely state, we have the battleground state of Texas, which has gotten more competitive in years past. But again, this election is not one for the books where we are going to have monumental shifts. Even with this conviction recently from, the New York jury, Texas, Florida, Ohio, Iowa, we are not going to see much movement. These states are red states, and Republicans are going to win them in 2024, and Donald Trump will win the electoral votes from these battleground states. Even with Democratic investments in them, they are too partisan right now, and this election is not changing enough for us to believe that Florida, Texas, Ohio, and Iowa would be any more bluer than they were in 2020. And based on some of these national numbers, if I was a Republican, I would be counting on winning these states by larger margins. Now, what we are left with are the true toss-up states. Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. The 7 battlegrounds that we talk about all the time. And so I think these states will be seeing hundreds of millions of dollars spent in them, multiple visits from every part of, the Democratic Party, Republican Party. Obama will probably hit all 7. You will probably see Biden at all 7, 9, 10 times each. You are going to see, excessive campaigning in these battleground states because they are going to make or break this election. Now, to really build up the suspense and the hype around this race, I want to start with the Sunbelt races first. States from Nevada ranging to North Carolina. And I think the reason for that is because these are states that right now, sure, are extremely important for the future of our democracy, the future of the country, the future of these political candidates, but they also have not been really at the focus of presidential elections the same way the Rust Belt has. And I have some very interesting takes on the Rust Belt that I think I might not have agreed with a month ago, but I think are valuable today, and that's the reason I'm going to be presenting them to you now. So, starting off in the state of Nevada, in fact, I want to go a bit in reverse order, end on Nevada, just to make it a little bit more spicy. North Carolina, we're going to start with right now. Donald Trump, I think, wins North Carolina. He won this state by a point in 2020. He won it by 3 points in 2016. I really do not see Joe Biden winning it in this election. I think he could, and that's why I keep it as a lean Republican state. I think it'll be close, but I think North Carolina has been that one stickler state where we have seen Democrats consistently unable to win in the state no matter how close it gets, no matter how much money they invest into it. North Carolina is just one of those states that at face value might seem to be a swing state, but ultimately has Republicans in the advantage. Not large, not a large advantage, and certainly not something that is unwinnable. We've seen Democrats win the governor's race in 2016, in 2020, and probably again in 2024. But in the presidential, Donald Trump is winning the state. When it comes down to Georgia, I would say right now Donald Trump also has the upper hand. I think the margin here is very close. I also think it largely depends too on what we see in terms of court cases over the next coming few months. Whether one happens in Georgia or whether or not Georgia becomes at the focus of the presidential election because of the fraudulent elector scandal. I mean, there are reasons to believe that, moving forward beyond the state of Georgia, or within the state of Georgia, rather, that some of these more important pieces of the trial, while it may not be the most important one, that it very well could be a defining factor for this race. And so Georgia right now, I would say Donald Trump has the upper hand. He's doing well on the polling data there. And I would also say where you are seeing a lot of the bleeding for the Democratic Party, Georgia is part of it. But I do think 2022's performance was a bit worrisome for Democrats. They didn't expand in the Senate like they did in Arizona. The governor's race was very much a Republican stronghold. Arizona did not have that. And so right now I would say Georgia is one where Donald Trump currently has the upper hand. 251 electoral votes. Now, this brings me to the final 2 states here in the Sunbelt region. We have the state of Nevada and the state of Arizona. And now, I'd like to say that my expectation for these states, generally speaking, is that these states vote together. That you find that, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, if one of them was to win one state, they probably were winning the other. And I think for a while, that made sense. That was the, standard understanding about these 2 states. That they vote together. They did it in 2020. They didn't do it in 2016, but I will say that, the demographics and what we've seen in these states have certainly changed since then. Arizona, though, is at a unique point in 2024 because I do think that Donald Trump has certainly made major inroads in the state. But one cannot ignore the fact that the Senate race there is moving very favorably towards the Democratic Party, and an abortion referendum is set to hit the ballot this fall. It is yet to officially announce fully that they've gotten the signatures verified. They're waiting to the final day to get as many signatures as possible, but it has the signatures. And we know it will be on the ballot this November, and it will probably diminish Republican advantages and overall benefit the Democratic Party. And so with that being said, might be an unpopular take, I think Joe Biden wins Arizona. I think it'll be very close, but I think it's going to do exactly what it did in 2022, defy the polls, shock Republicans, and ultimately abide by its core principles here, pro-choice, pro-LGBT, pro-Democrat. We saw it in 2020, 2018, a shift in the post-John McCain era of the Republican Party. Arizona is one of those states, goes to the Democratic Party, 237 electoral votes. I'm going to break away from my standard idea that these states vote all together and say that Nevada is going to be a Republican state. I think Democrats have seen excessive bleeding amongst Latino voters over the past 2 election cycles. It has been consistent. And while for a long time, Democrats have been able to counteract that, they did it in 2020 in Nevada specifically, where you saw Hispanic voters, Latino voters, shift away from Biden in a larger margin. And yet, Joe Biden ended up winning the state because it was counteracted by white suburbanites. This time, I think because you are seeing even more bleeding amongst minority groups, there isn't enough to counteract it as of right now, and I think Donald Trump wins the state. in 2024. And so Nevada, right now, Donald Trump's state, brings him to 257 electoral votes, Joe Biden to 237. Now, I'm going to start off by characterizing in the remaining 44 electoral votes here, the states that, these three Rust Belt states, super, super important. Hillary Clinton lost them, Joe Biden won them. And so Democrats really look at them and say, these are our, most important states. They're holding the convention in the Midwest in Chicago with the hope that it benefits them across these battleground states. Joe Biden at 237, he needs these battleground states to win. And so it really just depends, are these states going to vote together? Are they going to be, one way or the other? Are Democrats going to do what they did in 20, or is Donald Trump going to win them back just as he did in 2016? It's a very interesting, way to look at the races here because these states are going to be the decision makers. They are going to be the most important ones. I started off by saying that I believe in Joe Biden's home state of Pennsylvania. He wins this state. I think it's going to be roughly a very similar margin to what we saw in 2020. I will say, too, what we talk about international conflict, we talk about what's happening with the war with Israel and Palestine, and you find that in Pennsylvania specifically, this issue does not matter to voters as much as it does in some other states, including other states in the Rust Belt. You find that the reason why you are seeing a decrease in overall sentiment and support in these three states, and what you are finding with President Biden, is that he is losing support for his handling of international conflicts. And that is one of the main issues you see in regions like Dearborn, Michigan, where you have a high Arab American population that drives the Democratic base, and Democrats would not have won them without 2020, without that base. You find that in Michigan, it's a lot more important there than it is in Pennsylvania. You often find, too, that where the bleeding is happening the most is often amongst minority voters. And while it does exist in the Philadelphia region, the Pittsburgh region, you also find that Joe Biden is largely doing well in these states because the white vote that elected him back in 2020 is maintaining itself in 2024. And so you are finding that Pennsylvania right now seems to be one of the more favorable states across the battlegrounds, and I think there's a reason for that. And Pennsylvania, I think when it comes down to where Joe Biden can likely resonate with voters the best, can make a more personal, connection with, Pennsylvania is that state, even more so than Michigan or Wisconsin. And so that brings Joe Biden to 256 electoral votes, Donald Trump to 257, 25 remaining toss-up electoral votes. Now, I want to jump over Michigan and say that right now, I think despite, a lot of the conversation and the attention around these battleground states, I do not know if I believe these states will, in fact, vote altogether. I think there is certainly a case to be made that they might. I just don't think that is the case right now. And given that Pennsylvania is already a Democratic state on my map, I would say Wisconsin narrowly goes to Donald Trump. And the reason I say that is because I think based on the shift we've seen over the past 2 weeks in Wisconsin, and given that it was the closest state in 2020, the larger state for Trump in 2016, Wisconsin is not opposed to Republicans on the national level. These other states seem to be more opposed. Pennsylvania in 22 elected a Democrat to the Senate. Wisconsin elected a Republican. In 2016, Wisconsin was a larger Republican margin than Pennsylvania was in the Senate race. In 2018, Pennsylvania, you saw that Bob Casey did better than Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. And I think that what we find is that Wisconsin tends to be the most beneficial state for Republicans based on what we've seen in terms of overall composition. They almost elected a Republican governor. Michigan and Pennsylvania had their Democrats elected by over double digits. Point being, Wisconsin is a more conservative state, and I think would have more of an appetite to electing Donald Trump. And based on our national numbers, I do think Wisconsin would go back to the GOP. Now, we're on to our final state, Michigan, where I have already talked about how Joe Biden seems to have lost core bases in this state. But I do think, too, given where it was back in 2020, and what we know about bases that often do, in some cases, threaten their unwillingness, threaten to not vote for their eventual party nominee, I do absolutely think there are voters out there that will not eventually vote for Biden that did vote for him in 2020. I also think, too, that President Biden is going to win back a lot of the support that he has lost to the uncommitted vote, win back a lot of the support that we have seen across these states, especially post-conviction, where Donald Trump now has a whole list of things that could be weaponized and used against him by the Democratic Party's campaign, and arguably speaking too, things that we have seen shift the data in these states. Data that was taken months ago asking if Donald Trump is found guilty by a jury of his peers, would that make you less likely to vote for Donald Trump? You often found that the answer was a resounding yes for many independents. And while it may not be as impactful as shifting 5% of the overall electorate, in states like these, it can make or break a campaign. In this circumstance, I think it breaks Trump's campaign. My last prediction, I had Trump up in Michigan. Today, I have Biden up. And in the first time in almost a year, I have Joe Biden winning re-election very, very narrowly. A very close election that I think will take a lot for the Democratic Party to get back on track. But I genuinely believe this when I say this. Joe Biden is probably in the best position to win re-election today than he has been over the past year, that we have seen since probably August of 2023. President Biden is in a well-positioned place to continue through the general election season to build. The question is, will he do it? It might be shocking to see Pennsylvania bluer than Michigan, or Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania blue when the polls might be telling us otherwise. And I totally understand that apprehension. But I want to look back on past elections. Recently, in 22, how accurate were these polls? How accurate was the generic ballot? Sure, it predicted that Republicans won the popular vote, because they did. But they simultaneously predicted a 40 to 50 seat pickup in the House. Didn't happen. Predicted that Republicans would win in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. The polls said that. Go check them. Didn't happen. In the governor's races, Republicans would win Wisconsin, Kansas, that they would come within a point of Michigan, that they would come within 2 points of Pennsylvania, that they would win all of these states, Arizona, win all of these states. Didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because the polls were wrong. Be cautious when you look at the polls. Because while Donald Trump may be at a better point than he was in 2020, I still believe he loses the election. I think we are really, built up these blinders, ignoring the fundraising data, ignoring the special election results, ignoring the coalition building around the Biden-Harris re-election campaign. There is reason, genuine reason to believe, taking away the polls, that Joe Biden is on a pathway to victory. And I think once you get past those blinders, the same polls that have misled us in the past, we could very well see a pathway for Joe Biden's re-election. It's very narrow and it takes a lot. It requires a victory in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. And while you may be shocked to see states like Nevada and Wisconsin red, I do believe this is the current state of the race. Joe Biden wins re-election 271 to 267. Again, for the first time in over 6 months, I have Joe Biden in the upper hand, winning re-election against Donald Trump. I don't know how long this is going to sustain itself or how long that Joe Biden remains ahead on my map. We are going to start updating these every 2 weeks as the election really starts ramping up. But as of right now, this is where I am genuinely situated. It's a very weird looking electoral map, not nearly as put together as it was in 2020 with the very connected states with the exception of Georgia. It's an uglier electoral map, but it's where I believe the states are today. So 271, 267, we will see if this changes over the next couple of weeks. I'm interested to see the update around Flag Day of June. You're talking middle of June. It'll be interesting, and I think we will find it to be very informative and give us a general idea of the state of the race then, as it is doing today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.